Okay, Fernando. So I'm so excited to speak with you. I've been reading Smart Girl, um, and I want to start the interview by asking you for readers and watchers who have not um, seen this book, don't know anything about Smart Girl. Can you give a short pitch exactly of what this title contains and exactly what it's about?
Well, it is a cyberpunk graphic novel, really like pays an homage to the Blade Runner Philip K. Dick world. But in my, humble, impression, it takes kind of a different like path as it deals with the like emotional emancipation of a genoid, the main character Yuki. She works as a would say escort, companion, and laptop, everything for his master. So in a society with the elites, the CEOs, they have this one has an android or a genoid of a company. So they go obsolescence after 2 years time. So this is the case of our protagonist. So when she runs, she goes old. The master tries to change it for a new model, and there's this really violent moment where she realizes that she's gone old and there's a new model that's perfect. She's better memory, better resources, the skin almost like human. And then let's say that she decides like to rebel. She decides not to abandon or to transfer her memories and her whole life to the new unit, and she quits. And she starts like a revenge with all these. She has like, of course, like all smartphones have, all the memories, the personal files, the professional files, really stuff that really committing for him that can be really compromising. So she starts like a retaliation against his master, and in doing so, she discovers new things about herself.
And so her name is Yuki, and from what I read, it's not just her, but all of the models after 2 years, they start to become self-aware, correct?
They kind of get old. It's really an analogy with what happens with the obsolescence of today's smartphones, that we kind of our relations with objects, and at the same time the way we relate with persons as an extension of how we relate with objects. This fast consumption, we use it and we throw it away. And sometimes, of course, there's an analogy in the book of how we relate with persons.
So I definitely can see some parallels there, with human beings and the android. So I really dig it. You had mentioned, it's cyberpunk, and you had mentioned Blade Runner. I believe did you write or I'm sorry, did you do art for a Blade Runner comic prior to this, or did you not have any hands in any Blade Runner projects?
I'm doing right now. I'm drawing Blade Runner Origins for
Okay,
Titan Comics.
that's what I thought. Okay.
Yes.
So was your work on that, did that predate your creation of Smart Girl, or is it the other way around? Because you did Smart Girl, you got an opportunity to move into Blade Runner.
It's the other way around. Yeah, I did Smart Girl like 3 years ago now. It was published in France and then afterwards in Spain. And yes, I'd like to think that the guys in Titan, they just got me the gig because they liked the cyberpunk like ambient I gave to Smart Girl, which of course played a tribute to Blade Runner. So it kind of makes sense that I'm doing Blade Runner now. It's it's kind of going back to the original source.
So with the years and the timeline for Smart Girl, I noticed that it starts, like, the changes start in 2028, and then it takes a jump to 2070. Was there any reason that you picked those specific years, those dates, or that amount of time?
There is kind of a slight symbolism in the being the years 80, of the 80s of the 21st century. Just an homage to the fact that Blade Runner, that sort of cyberpunk ambient was created in almost the 80s of the 20th century. So it's kind of what society would look in a 100 years time, and of course paying a tribute to those 80s.
So I know that you said it was initially published in French, and then in Spain. Spain is where you were from, correct?
Yes.
So is your first language Spanish then?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So I wanted to know, do you think that there's anything now in this new English translation that maybe got lost or kind of changed when it switched to English, or do you think it is a really good, you know, bit by bit translation?
You know, the thing is, I mean, I wrote it in English directly for one reason. I mean, because it was originally published in France, and my French, I mean, I speak French, but not as good as to be able to write like a graphic novel. So my editor in France speaks no Spanish, so kind of English was the in between language for ourselves. So I wrote it directly in English. I mean, I'm an English philologist. So I mean, of course, my English is not perfect, right? I mean, I've studied like literature and linguistics, so I kind of, I mean, handle really kind of comfortably, like writing in English. Of course, for a graphic novel, I could not write like I don't know, Virginia Woolf, but I felt comfortable in doing so. Of course, with the Titan version, there was it was revised, especially the dialogues. So mostly because my English was more kind of British English, so they wanted to make it sound more than like American English. So the dialogues were revised, and I supervised the revision. So yes, I mean I speak English, but for example, to make the dialogues like really sound like real people speaking in English, that of course needed like some help of a native English speaker.
Right. Okay. So I wanted to know then, there's lots of words, like obviously made up words in this. It's fantasy. Did you have any trouble landing on exactly what words you wanted to use, like the I think it's chromatic or I can't remember. There's a lot of terms in the book that are not real words. Did you have any trouble figuring out, you know, names for these things, or did you pretty much just go with whatever the first thing is that came to your head?
No, I mean lots of the names, even the proper names and the names of objects like the schemata, for example, or the of course I use Geno and Android, well, both. Mostly they come from all the sources I feed from during the moment of, I mean, like finding reference and finding inspiration. So, for example, the Donna Haraway, I mean, the Cyborg Manifesto, it gave a lot of input. And also schemata is also a philosophical term for a scheme. So I kind of organized ideas that fit into a plan that was perfect to name an artificial intelligence that are kind of starting to run into the internet, and especially one of them that runs most of the, I would say, the organization of the world in that time.
So
So they're mostly based in ideas before.
I think one is Imahi is like the group of people, are they called Imahi, Imahi? Is that a word that came from somewhere else, or is that something that you had made up for them?
No. In that case, that was totally made up. So of course, I mean, sometimes one of the ones I made up, I just want them maybe to resemble. So they are not what I mean, but they sound like what I wanted them to mean. So whenever someone hears Imai, maybe, you know, depending on the mind of the reader, of the listener, they associate with something that sounds similar. That's kind of the way I try to find words. I mean, trying to make a phonetic similarity that really ascribes to the content that wants to convey that name, that character, for example.
That's a really, really smart way to look at it. So before you, I mean, smart girl, before you got to Smart Girl, you did a lot of work with DC in the past, but it's very different. The stuff that you had done before is very different than what you do now. Do you think that's because you were doing mostly art and this is a storytelling opportunity for you?
Definitely, that's one thing. I mean, I've always liked. I mean, I've been always like to write my own stories, and I did some stuff in Spain, like short stories, and then I did a graphic novel for the youth, which is called Cassandra. And then I went on to DC Comics, which was really, I mean, like a dream come true for me, and I was really happy doing it, I mean, working for them. But after 6 years, I just felt the need of doing my own stuff again. So I think maybe on the one side, I mean, yeah, when you're writing your own stuff, you just pour your soul there and you give a different approach. And then of course I had more freedom to create to lay out the pages as I wanted to. I had no, I mean, just to put as many panels as I wanted, or that changes a lot the approach to the whole layout of the story. So maybe that's a change.
So now that you obviously Blade Runner inspired your Smart Girl series or book, and now it's kind of come full circle with you going back to Blade Runner. Are there any times when you're working on Blade Runner now that you realize things are a little bit different than you initially perceived them in that story? Are there any things that you're learning and thinking, well, this is a little bit different than what I base my world on? Or do you feel like you were so versed in Blade Runner that it's kind of like an easier experience and you know what to expect?
I think, of course, I mean, when I started Blade Runner, I was already familiarized with the cyberpunk environment. But then the series I'm working in, it's Blade Runner Origins. It's very funny because it takes place like 10 years before the original movie. That's 2009. So the way they asked me to portray especially the Los Angeles of that moment is like to reduce maybe the amount of technology and make it more noir based, more detective-esque. So I would say in this case I'd had to reduce the level of technology in the skyscrapers, in the streets, in the in the holograms. Actually, there were no holograms at that moment. So it was just tuning down a little bit of technology and tuning up the noirish sort of shadowy black and white, like dark effect of the detective stories.
So as far as Smart Girl goes, is there anything that you could see yourself doing where you return to this universe or doing some kind of universe similar to this, where more cyberpunk things in the future outside of Blade Runner for your own stories?
Yes, definitely there will be. I'm planning on a book for next year, and it's definitely, I would say, not a continuation, but not a sequel exactly, but it takes place in the same world in which Smart Girl takes place. So I realized there were like lots of small stories that I wanted to tell of life, everyday life in a cyberpunk world, and the way I want to do it in this next book. It's kind of about making a mosaic of the different stories, how the androids, genoids, robots, implanted people kind of relate to each other. We've seen many stories, sort of Terminator, where Cyberdyne wins and he kills the rest of the humanity. But we'd never seen how these robots, this new technological society, would develop. What would be the essence? Because they have been programmed to be like humans, to serve humans. So once they're on their own, how would they really, develop their own freedom? How would they live? And that really, it was an interesting question. And these stories deal with these issues.
So that reminds me, because like early in the book, there's the quote where it says, worlds that create stories and stories that create stories, worlds that create worlds. And that kind of hits the nail on the head, because you created Smart Girl, but also you made such a rich world that there are worlds inside there. There are people inside there that now you feel like you need to explore more and see where they go. So I think that kind of parallels back to the quote that you had put in towards the beginning of the book. I wanted to make sure you had an opportunity to say if there's anything else about Smart Girl I didn't ask that you might like to include, maybe that people don't ask you that you would like to share.
Yes, there are a couple of issues I'm receiving. Just for one instance, input which I'm not really fond of is because, of course, the story deals mainly with the emancipation of a genoid. It's an android, but it's a female android genoid, and of course it refers to all cases of emancipation. So of course I'm a man, but I can understand perfectly well. Female emancipation in all sorts of cases, because for me it just refers to one humankind, and we can understand and empathize with the other. So the superhero sort of style when drawing it, and the fact that they begin being like so these sorts of slaves. Some people, I think, they have not really understood the fact that, of course, in order to portray emancipation, you have to define the shackles in the beginning. So that's why these people are dressed in this manner. And of course, there's a wide variety of characters, not just the sexy, character, which is Margaret, because she was designed to be like this. That's what makes her emancipate. So I think there's this irony there that when you see that at first glance, they're used like these sort of serious graphic novels should have this kind of, more austere style. Whereas my style is really, reflects a lot of my influence from superheroes and sci-fi and action comics. But at the same time, I like the contrast. I've been reading like stories in which, I don't know, Captain Marvel dies of cancer. Yellow Jacket beats his wife. So no matter the way they were drawn, they were really, really amazing, touching stories. Dealing with very serious stuff. So I don't find like this contrast, but I can understand that when some reviews or some critics read it, they think, what is it a superhero? Is it serious? So I just wanted to say that it's done on purpose. I wanted to walk in this path in between.
Yeah, I think it was actually a really good blend. And I like you said, you have to define the shackles. If in order to understand the emancipation, you need to understand what wasn't there before. And like you said, this is the image that is conjured up for her. She has no control over her creation, and there's reason behind that. So I think I totally get where you're going for there. And I appreciate you clarifying it though for readers and listeners who might have maybe a bias, based on the cover or the way that the art looks. Is there anything that you would like to plug? I know you have a book coming out next year, you had said. Did you want to talk any more about that? Is there anything social media wise you'd like to plug before I wrap up?
I'm working in parallel in Blade Runner Origins, which is coming out, releasing like every monthly, and then of course the trade paperbacks. And then in parallel, I'm working for a French publisher, Glenad, where I'm writing and drawing another creator-owned project called Winter Queen, and it's a thriller, based in a kind of urban but magical world. It's a totally different story, but also I'm focusing on the emotional, development of the main character, which is really what I'm interested in. So this will be released in, I think it's next year, actually the summer of next year. It's going to take some time. So for the moment, that's it, I would say. Thank you.
That'll be exciting. I can't wait to see that. And thank you so much for talking with me. It's been an honor. I appreciate your taking the time.